Just a few days ago, I found a story about a teachers union in Minneapolis and how they solved a strike walkout crisis by promising to fire white people first. I thought that was just a throwaway story and another example of how woke policies actually end up being the most racist, and it was a hypocritical example of Dems and leftists being woke racists. Now, you don't have to follow that other story in order to follow this one. However, I'll add a link to that up there now. Okay, a brief reminder about this story. There was a teacher strike and they resolved it by promising to fire and lay off white people first if the need ever arises. Seniority would be ignored and they focus only on skin color. Well, since this article broke, the internet went a little nuts. Threats of lawsuits, Twitter warriors making angry posts, and plenty of YouTubers doing videos like mine, but not nearly as entertaining. Obviously. But in typical leftist fashion, they doubled down and stated that these racist policies will stay in place to remedy the effects of past discrimination. Now, this was completely predictable. Leftists and SJWs always lie. And leftists and SJWs always double down. That's a great book series by Vox Day, and I highly recommend reading them to get a great insight in how the leftist brain works. I'm looking at you, book zealots. So they double down, and they say that current racism is the cure to past racism. Now, I personally don't think that racism is nearly as bad as the media tries to portray. But adding more racism can't be the answer, can it? So there's this thought experiment I always like to run when I hear a radical idea. I always ask, well, how does this play out? Now, you have to take a minute and sort it out when you hear a radical idea, without instantly dismissing it just because it's new to you. Now, this would be a habit that would be really good for just about everyone. So someone at one time left a bucket of wheat in the rain, and then it fermented in the sun. When it got all foamy from the wheat rotting, he decided to drink it. That guy was crazy, right? But that's the most likely explanation of how they discovered beer. So keep an open mind when presented with a new concept. Okay, the backstory on this teacher problem is that they didn't have enough teachers. Class sizes were too large, teachers were overworked and underpaid. The solution is to fire white people first. Okay, does this solve the problem of not enough teachers? Well, probably not. If you were a white person, would you want to work in this school district knowing that you were definitely going to be the first to get fired or laid off? Well, probably not. So right away, they will have less applicants to be teachers. I can speculate that only black and brown teachers will be applying from here on out. Does that ensure that the district gets the best candidates? Well, it's hard to tell. I am absolutely certain there are many fantastic and well-qualified teachers who are darker than Wonder Bread. But let's do a sports analogy, okay? You own a hockey team, but you can only pick players from Louisiana. Sure, there are millions of people in Louisiana, and there might be some great hockey players. But it's a small fraction of people in the world, and you aren't even looking at Canada, so the chances of getting the absolute best hockey players has naturally been reduced. Well, that's the same thing with this school district. The people of color make up about 20 to 30% of the country. So you're leaving 70 to 80% of the possible candidates off the table just because of the way they look. So if your goal is to provide the best education to the students, then this is nonsense. Your hockey team will not win. Now let's talk about all the teachers that do get hired and remain hired. They now have to stay in that district forever or find another district with the exact same policies. They can't transfer and move to a different part of the country. How is their CV going to look? During the interview process, they won't be able to prove they were hired because they were qualified, only that they filled a certain quota. I hire lots of people in my businesses. I would never hire someone who was hired solely on looks and not on merit or skills. No way. This legacy will travel with them forever. It basically locks them into this job with no hopes of getting out. It's like the welfare trap. You make just enough to stay exactly where you are. There's no chance of getting out. This may all unravel the moment someone sues them for discrimination. But I'm guessing that the city settles out of court with a nice payout so they can keep this social experiment going. What about the kids? Are they getting the best possible education? Hard to say, but mathematically, probably not. So you'd have to assume that the smartest and the most highly motivated kids leave. Private school, homeschool, they just leave. This only leaves the kids who need the most help. Troubled kids, learning disabilities, violent kids. Well, now you can almost guarantee that the exceptional teachers won't apply here at all. They can get jobs anywhere else. There's a teacher shortage after all. Great teachers of any color can pick and choose where they want to work. So after a few years, you now have the most challenging kids and the least desirable teachers. Everyone with any skills or options has long since left. The school district becomes a wasteland. I give it 5 years. Problem solved, right? This is leftism in a nutshell. It's a flawed concept, and it has predictable results. Okay, if you have made it this far, you probably have some opinions. I made some pretty bold statements. So gather your thoughts and tell me where I went wrong, and how you'd solve this problem. Or maybe you think I'm correct, and you've never really thought about it before. Leave me a comment. I'll reply back to as many as I can.